Hey guys, this is going to be a real quick video about the forks on the T7. So I've been wanting to do this video for a long time, but I've kind of been debating whether or not I should even do it at all. So basically what I've done is I've changed out the fork oil in the T7 and replaced it with some heavier, thicker fork oil and a little bit more of it. It was recommended to me by someone to do that. I have done that before in the past with other bikes with sort of minimal advantage, but what I've end up doing with the T7 has made it substantially better. Now, I'm not going to tell you that this is a substitute for spending a couple of $1,000s on getting better internals for the forks. It's not. This is a cheap shit budget alternative for people like me that don't want to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on forks. So you can increase the bottoming out resistance of these forks, which is mostly what I wanted to do. For about $30, $40 worth of fork oil. Some people think that that's a bad idea to do and it's not the best, and I agree, it's a cheap band-aid sort of a fix, but it works. And I can tell you now that it was about 4,000 kilometers ago that I did it to this bike, so I've had plenty of time to test it in all sorts of conditions, and it hasn't had any adverse effects whatsoever that I can tell. Anyway, the bike still rides fine, it hasn't bucked me off. It's still comfortable on the road. It might be a little bit stiffer with that heavier oil in there, but I'm telling you now, I don't hesitate sending it over the erosion mounds and stuff now. Like I'm not going to tell you that I ride it as hard as I used to ride my 500, but I know that I can hit those jumps with a lot more confidence now than I could before. If you own a T7 and you've pushed the suspension, it does not take much, and you've felt and heard that bottoming out noise, you'll know what it is, and it's not nice. It sounds really bad. This has fixed that. When it does bottom out now, it doesn't make that clangy metal on metal sound anymore, and it takes a fair bit more to actually get it to bottom out. As I said, look, it's not going to turn it into a motocross bike, but it does help a lot. So unfortunately I didn't film any of it because it was an experiment. So I'll quickly run down what I did. Now, just a disclaimer, I'm not recommending to anybody to do this. I'm just telling you what I did and the benefits that it had for me, because you go mucking around with forks when you don't really know what you're doing, you can have some pretty bad consequences. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a fork expert, far from it, but I'm still alive and the bike's still in one piece, so I must have done something right. Anyway, so real quick, what I did, if you sort of know what you're doing with forks, in a nutshell, I drained the oil out of each fork, and I only got about 500 ml of the standard stock OEM fork oil out, so 500 ml out of each fork. According to the service manual, there's supposed to be 620 or 630 ml of oil in each one, so I don't know whether Yamaha is shortchanging us in the factory there or what. So yeah, basically I drained out all the oil out of each fork, 500 ml out of each one, replaced it with some 15 weight, I think it's Motul fork oil, which is about $20 for a litre, and I put in 650 ml in each fork. So that's a little bit over what Yamaha recommends, but definitely a fair bit more than what was in there from stock. So yeah, that's what I've done. If you don't really know what you're doing with forks, as I said, if you're not confident in your abilities, don't try and do it yourself. But quick rundown is, jack the bike up, remove the front wheel, take your front fork guards and fender off, all the brake lines and everything, so you got free access to your forks. You probably want to remove these shrouds here so you can undo the top pinch bolts. So the first thing you want to do is undo these, loosen them back them right off, and then you can loosen this top cap before you actually remove the forks. That'll make it a lot easier for you. Now, I didn't disassemble the forks completely. I just did a quick, what they call a dump and run with the fork oil. There's a link to the video up in the corner here, which is the basic instructions that I used to dump the fork oil. Basically, these are open chamber forks, so you can drain all the oil out without disassembling the whole lot. Basically all I did was take the caps off, tip them up, drain it out. Sometimes you have to pump the fork up and down a bit to get that inner chamber out, but once you've got about 500 ml out, you should be pretty right to go ahead and refill it. Now, you'll probably want something to measure out the amount of oil you want to put in. As I said, I put in 650 into each one. It is tricky getting it in there with the springs and everything in there still, but it's doable. Some kind of small funnel would probably help. But yeah, that's basically it, guys. And then you whack it all back together and enjoy. As I said, if you want the primo performance from this bike, you're going to have to spend a whole shitload of money on forks and shock. But for me, 40 bucks worth of oil and about an hour's worth of my time has made it a lot more fun to ride. Now being able to hit those bumps and jumps and whatnot and not have to worry about it. So yeah, that's Josh's dodgy cheap ass tip for today. Change out the fork oil on your T7, put some 15 weight in there and enjoy. But like I said, don't do it. Real quick too guys, if you want to see how to do your suspension properly, there's a link up in the corner here to Nerb's video. He did a proper replacement, some different fork cartridges on his T7, so yeah, check that out. Anyway, see you on the next one. Whoa. There's a couple of things I forgot to mention that I thought I probably should. Obviously, you guys know that changing the fork oil is not anything new. I know that it's been around for a long time. A lot of people do it all the time. I basically just wanted to share, you know, that it worked for me and the specifics of what oil I used and how much of it I used and that sort of thing. So just to basically give you an idea of where to start if you did want to try and do this yourself. One of the good things about doing this is it is relatively cheap and easy to go back to how it was before if you find that you don't like it. So you just have to buy some 10 weight oil and change it back out. As I touched on earlier, this bike had about 12,000 Ks on it when I actually changed the oil out in it. The oil actually came out pretty clean. It's some weird white looking fork oil, but anyway, it was clean, and it now has 16,000 Ks on it. So yeah, 4,000 Ks on that 15 weight oil, and it's been fine. So good to change the oil out regularly anyway. So you know, it's a win-win. Also, as you probably know, setting your clickers is a fairly important part of setting up your suspension as well. I can't remember exactly what the clickers settings I'm using are at the moment, but I'll check it out and I'll put them up on the screen for you guys. I don't recommend anybody use someone else's clicker settings because, you know, it's very dependent on your weight and your bike setup and what you're carrying. But, you know, I'm happy to share mine if it gives you some kind of a starting point. Also, I have the preload on the rear shock maxed out. Some people say that's a bad thing, but you know. Alright, and while I've got you here, I've got two extra unrelated tips. Well, they're T7 tips, but nothing to do with suspension. I wanted to share them with you guys. Let me just grab this camera. Firstly, guys, check this nut on your steering. At one point there, I felt some play in the steering, and it was, yeah, the bars were all loose. Turns out this nut was real loose, only finger tight. It's lucky I didn't lose it, so I highly recommend, even if yours isn't loose, take it out, put some thread lock on it and do it up nice and tight, because they do come loose. Apparently it's a common thing, so something to check. Also, if you're running the pre-filter on the stock snorkel, as I am, I've actually cut a piece off the top of the snorkel, cut it back to the first groove or ridge on the snorkel. This gives you a fair bit more clearance to get that pre-filter out without bending the snorkel too much. It actually works quite well. And as an added bonus, previously I was really only getting a thin dirty strip across the front of the pre-filter, so it sort of was only using a very small part of it. Now that I've cut a bit more off that snorkel, it seems to get dirty all the way around it, so probably a little bit better airflow, but the main thing is it makes it a lot easier to get out, and it still stays on there fine with that zip tie. So yeah, there you go, a couple of extra little tips for you. As always guys, if you enjoyed this vid or got something out of it, please drop a like, leave a comment, all that crap, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers. Right, we're getting proper mode.
Unique New York.
Unique New York.